Welcome back here to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast as we begin the second segment, and I thought this was pretty interesting based on how it all played out, talking about the ESPN survey that came out a couple of days ago on these categories, superlatives, whatever you'd like to call it, on the current state of the quarterbacks across the NFL today. ESPN put out this survey to 100 plus NFL players to rank quarterbacks in different categories, like I said. Almost like if you've seen any of these who's most likely to videos, it sort of falls into that range of what kind of categories and content that was provided by this survey. So the categories that are in question are the top 3 current quarterbacks in the NFL, predicting the most successful rookie quarterbacks in this year's class, most overrated quarterback, most underrated quarterback, and biggest trash-talking quarterback to round it all off. 103 players from 25 different teams gave their input on this survey. Of course, they all remained anonymous, but there were certainly some interesting results from this survey. So we're going to start off with what I think is the most obvious one, in my opinion. The top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL, according to NFL players, sort of played out like I anticipated it to. Patrick Mahomes, number 1. Number 2 would be Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow in at number 3, based on the responses by current NFL players. It was all based off of a point system. First place votes got you 3 points, second place votes got you 2 points, and third place only got you 1 vote. And Patrick Mahomes was the resounding number 1 choice at 291 points, then Lamar Jackson at 124, and Joe Burrow at third place with 51 points. And the ones that followed after that were Josh Allen with 39 points and Aaron Rodgers, sort of surprising, with 32 points. And I think, like I said, it was the most obvious one. Not too many people wouldn't have put Patrick Mahomes at number 1. Lamar Jackson, just coming off of an MVP season, clearly the number 2, was ranked the number 2 player in the NFL Network's top 100 rankings, so this makes sense. And I think Joe Burrow, too, even though he had an injured-riddled season last year, the success that his team has, the Bengals, has when he does play, it's pretty astounding. So seeing these 3 guys as the top 3, I didn't really have too much issue with it. So moving on to the next category, the most successful rookie quarterback, predicting who is going to be that most successful rookie quarterback in terms of the NFL players currently, sort of played out like this. Caleb Williams at number 1, not so much of a surprise. Jaden Daniels at 2, and then at number 3, J.J. McCarthy. And those 3 guys were followed up by Michael Penix and Bo Nix with the same amount of points. And what I found interesting, based on those top 5 names that I just listed out, that Drake May wasn't up there. I felt like maybe he could have been in at number 4. Honestly, he could have been at number 3, just in my opinion, just based on JJ being hurt and everything. Now, I did fail to see when they did take all of these votes. It could have been closer to the draft, but even still, a little surprised that Drake May was last, but I guess that does obviously have to do with the state of the New England Patriots, so that could have been a big thing, much like Caleb Williams being the resounding number 1, just because a lot of players mentioned that the Bears situation, adding Keenan Allen, adding DeAndre Swift, drafting Rome Odunze was a big part as to why they voted him number 1. One NFC South player brought up the fact that Jaden Daniels, being the face of the Washington Commanders essentially right now, and their new head coach and new owner, was something that they thought was exciting and a good situation overall for him and the Commanders. And it was interesting also, one of the points that was made by an NFC South player, just in regards to Caleb Williams, the amount of pressure that he has to deal with compared to everybody else. He sort of used the example of similarly comparing him to Patrick Mahomes, with all the hype build up around Caleb and how his play style is similar to Patrick. He said that if Caleb doesn't look like Patrick Mahomes out there, that type of pressure is way different than what people expect out of Jaden Daniels or Michael Penix or Bo Nix and things like that. That's the kind of expectations that Caleb has to deal with. So it is something to keep in mind, and it is something that I found fascinating and pretty accurate overall, just because all the amount of hype that Caleb has had to deal with already, everybody micro-analyzing everything he does on and off the field, it could get pretty heavy, and not a lot of people experience that, obviously, but not a lot of people deal with it in that same breath. So I thought that was an accurate point that I thought I'd share in this evaluation of it, but ranking them 1 through 3, this one was pretty accurate as well, something that I probably would have came up with if I was asked to predict the most successful rookies. Then this is where it got a little interesting. This is where it got a little controversial for some people. The most overrated quarterback in the NFL, according to this anonymous survey, you see Josh Allen was voted as the most overrated. Jalen Hurts up there in at number 2, and Tua Tagovailoa rounding off that number 3 spot. Josh Allen and even Tua, I would say, probably the two most polarizing quarterbacks that we have in the NFL nowadays, because some people look at Josh Allen as the equal almost to Patrick Mahomes, or as close as you can get to Patrick, whereas other people just look at him as a turnover machine, not being able to get over that hump of being Patrick Mahomes, and sort of you have both groups just butting heads constantly. You know, Josh Allen, you're just not being able to beat the Chiefs, everyone holding that over his head. And similarly with Tua Tagovailoa, you know, drafted high, all this potential out of Alabama, but in the NFL, people criticize his arm, his limited athleticism, I guess you could say, and things like that. A lot of people mentioning that he's a system or a benefactor of Mike McDaniel's system with Miami, the weapons that he has around him as well. And that's sort of the same situation with Jalen Hurts, right? Because one NFC East player, yes, anonymous again, was quoted by saying regarding Jalen Hurts, he said, "How hard is it to throw a jump ball to A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith every time?" So it kind of encapsulates everything that comes with the criticism that Jalen Hurts has. People question his arm, his decision-making, and again, just being surrounded by a great team as to why he could be overvaluated or overrated in this sense by a lot of people. And again, with just some of these other comments that were made, one NFC West player brought up the fact that Josh Allen just has too many turnovers, and it is true in a sense. You know, you look at this stat, since 2008, Josh Allen is first in amount of turnovers that he has thrown with 102 since 2008. So he wasn't even close to being in the NFL by that time. So that does bring up a good point. But I think, you know, most overrated, I'm in the mindset of Josh. I hold Josh Allen to a high regard. I think he is truly one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, and I can see why people send a lot of criticism his way, and that's not going to ease up now that Stephon Diggs is gone. If anything, it might get a little bit worse, and people might put more blame on Josh Allen if he's not able to drag his team over the finish line now, just based on the fact that everybody wants to compare him to Patrick Mahomes. Different situations, and I think Josh, more often than not, wins you games than really loses you games. You know, he does have some bad turnovers again, right? But, you know, the highs and the benefits that he does bring, I think, outweigh that, much like a bunch of other quarterbacks. So I don't really know why it's highlighted so much with Josh, but again, one of the most polarizing quarterbacks in the NFL, and this sort of highlights that in a nutshell pretty much. So that's how that played out. And the second to last one here, a little surprising to me as well, most underrated quarterback. Brock Purdy and Matthew Stafford actually had the same amount of points at 14. And then third place, I put Jordan Love there, but it was sort of a 4-way tie, or actually no, 3-way tie with Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, and Jordan Love getting the same amount of votes. So I put Jordan Love in there, but Kirk, Jared Goff were also in there, technically in at number 3 for the most underrated quarterback. And this one surprised me because I figured that Brock would be in the other category as one of the most overrated, and he wasn't even in the the top 5, I want to say. Yeah, he wasn't, because after Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Tua, it was followed up by Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, and Brock Purdy was in there, but he was the last place, 5th place in that category with 6 votes. So for a lot of NFL players to rank him as the most underrated quarterback, I was not expecting that, just because I feel like most fans, when they watch him, feel like Brock Purdy's just a benefactor, again, of having Debo, having Ayuk, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Kyle Shanahan as his coach. Whereas, if you look at it from a player's perspective with these votes, he's actually considered one of the most underrated quarterbacks. So I thought it was interesting, that dynamic, how it flipped. And Matthew Stafford is always included in these categories, talking about one of the most underrated quarterbacks. I think people are starting to see it now more than ever, especially seeing him in the playoffs and in that environment. But that one wasn't too surprising. And already Jordan Love, he is starting to build up a lot of hype. And to be in this category, again, not too surprising, but it was a 3-way tie with Jordan Love, Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins. So I think this one played out pretty accurately as well. Also behind those guys were Bryce Young at number 7, right outside the top 3. Then Justin Herbert and Dak Prescott as well, right behind those guys. But then lastly, the last category I thought was a pretty fun one. The quarterbacks who talk the most trash, Josh Allen again winning this category with 26 votes. Then Baker Mayfield, then Aaron Rodgers, followed up by Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud, and Joe Burrow. This one I think was one of the most accurate ones as well. Along with the top 3 quarterbacks, this one doesn't really surprise me. I think we know the character of all 3 of these guys, and Josh Allen responded to this on Twitter when the survey came out. Of course, he was rated the most overrated quarterback in the NFL, but he poked fun at it, saying that he was voted the most likely to trash talk out of all the quarterbacks. So I like that they included this. Baker also, knowing his personality, and also Aaron Rodgers up there as well. Not really too surprising here with these 3 guys to round out these categories, these superlatives that NFL players voted on. So I gave my thoughts, but I'd love to know what you guys think of these categories, who was voted number 1 and who wasn't included that you thought should definitely be included in these rankings. Leave your guys' thought in the comment section afterwards, or also just in the live chat as we move on with a couple more segments on today's show. One of those being the fact that Sean McVay recently named his starting running back his designated punt returner for 2024. A little bit unusual, a pretty unique decision by Sean McVay. So we're going to get into that, why he decided to name Kyren Williams that punt returner, and also the kind of options that the Rams have available to them behind Kyren Williams that makes Sean McVay so comfortable with deploying Kyren Williams as the punt returner. That is all coming up right after this break. Don't go anywhere.
Look